I'm Katrina, and this is So in Tare. Today we're talking about best advice for first-time gardeners. In September, I was an exhibitor at the National Heirloom Expo in Ventura, California, and I collected a list of things that gardeners from all over, there's people there from all over the world, wrote down for their best advice for first-time gardeners. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity to share that with you guys. I have one more. I had one before this. I'll put a link up here. We already talked about one of our other topics, and then we have one more topic coming up after that. The one that I put the link there is for your favorite volunteer plant, and then tips for composting is coming up. So I'm kind of spreading these out, throughout the year. And the other one should be maybe in a month or two. So I want to talk to you about people's best tips for first-time gardeners. So I'll go through these. I will also at the end give my tips for first-time gardeners. And believe it or not, I know it's winter. It is time to start thinking about gardening. And gardening is awesome. The seed catalogs are coming, and you gotta know what to do. So, first-time gardeners. Let's see what the people say. And I will put a picture of this at the end so you guys can take a really good screenshot of this if you want to keep it. So, there you go. All right, don't give up. Don't give up. That's important. You'll make a lot of mistakes. I still make mistakes. Everybody still makes mistakes. No matter how old, how long they've been gardening, everybody makes mistakes. Don't give up. Grow the plants that do well in your area. Absolutely. It is perfectly fine to experiment. Start with the ones that you know grow in your area already. Maybe talk with a neighbor, see what other people are growing. Start with those ones. And understand that if you're experimenting with something else, it may or may not work. And that's okay. Don't give up. Here's another don't give up. Know your USDA planting zone and chill hours. That was the one I wrote. And I'll talk about that more at the end. Keep on farming, so keep on going. There's a lot of don't give up. When you're a new gardener, I see a hummingbird. When you're a new gardener, there's all sorts of things that happen or can happen. Your water can get shut off, it gets too hot, too cold. There's a lot of stuff that can happen. It can be really frustrating, and it's important. Just hang in there. Hang in there. Use insectivories. So basically an area of your yard, have it for insects, for good insects, and that way you already have your predators when you get your aphids, when you get your pest bugs. You already have your predators in your yard, and that's a pretty good idea. That way if you use insects, you don't have to use insecticides. Grow food you enjoy. This is so important. Start with the foods that you already eat. That's easy. You're gonna eat it. Go ahead. I don't like onions. I don't grow onions. Every once in a while, I'll use an onion for a recipe, usually salsa, or there's a soup recipe that I do use them for. Usually, I flat out omit onions. I don't grow them. There's no point in me growing them. I don't like them. I can take up that space with something else. If I had more property, I might grow a few. I might not, because it's easy enough to go to the store and get, the 2 I use in a year. So, grow foods you enjoy. All right, be creative. Yes, so if you're starting your plants, you can start them in many different things. You can go to the store and get plants already started. That's perfectly fine. You can plant seeds into cups, into takeout containers. Turn your takeout containers into seed pots. There's all sorts of things you can do to be creative. Be creative with your watering, how you get the water to there. If you want to plant things all in one place or scatter them out, it's all up to you. Water slow and deep, but not often. This one, I believe, mainly is for trees, although it can also be true for your vegetable garden. If you only do really frequent light waterings, then your plants have roots that are on the surface. They don't go deep. So if you miss a watering, if it gets really hot, those plants are not going to do as well. If you give them deep water, that water goes all the way into the soil, all the way through the soil columns. And then the roots can follow that water, and they have a good, nice structure to, with wind, or with if it gets hot, it can still go down, and it's there's stuff down there, there's moisture down there that's good. So it's a way to keep your plants more healthy. All right, perceived failures lead to success. So we say everybody fails in the garden. It happens. It sucks. It happens. It's okay, because they're learning time. It's a learning experience. When you have a perceived failure in the garden, you learn something, and you can apply that tomorrow. You can apply it next year. You can apply it to that new property you're getting. There's a lot of different things that can come out of a failure that are positive. So, perceived failures. Grow bio-intensive. When you have more species in a space, you can grow more plants in that area, and they protect each other they kind of mask each other's scent from the bad bugs, right? And it just gives a better ecosystem to that bed, to that area in your yard, to that even in a pot. Growing bio-intensive, basically make sure that those plants have friends. And if they're different types, that will even do better. Get some good seeds from Baker Creek. The National Heirloom Expo is always put on by Baker Creek Seeds. However, they are wonderful. So rareseeds.com is the website for that. Not only is it someone that I know who did that, and that was not an employee. And they have great seeds. They do. Find great seed sources. So there's great seeds, Baker Creek. There's great seeds at a couple other places. Not more than a couple. There's several good seeds places. And then also getting seeds from people that are local to you those seeds will be more adapted to your local environment. So that's also a good idea. Start with the varieties that others in your area already grow successfully. So this kind of goes with grow plants that are already grown in your area. These are varieties. So there are some tomato varieties that are really good in hot weather. There's some tomato varieties that are really good in really humid areas. And so the different areas have different issues. So like humidity is one issue, super heat is another issue, super cold is another issue. And there are different varieties that deal with those different things. If you already know what someone's growing, try that first, especially if you're a first-time gardener. And then maybe next year experiment. You can experiment that year as well. At least plant some that somebody else is planting and being successful with, so you can actually gauge what you're doing and what you would change for something you know is successful. Cage your garden first. Primitive Tech Homestead. So this person actually caged his garden beds. He's having so much problem with pests getting in and getting to his food that he wasn't getting any of his food. And so that is something to think about, is what kinds of things in your area are going to get to your plants. Do you have a lot of deer? Do you have a lot of different animals, different rats or something? Are you in an area that you need to actually cage out animals? So that is, if you know that, brassicas get covered a lot of times with this cloth, and if you know that the cabbage moth is in your area, like having a big impact in your area, then just start out with those things to be successful. So that's smart. Don't quit. This is in a different language, and I don't know how to read that. But if you can read that, let me know what it is in the comments. Observe your area, start small, succeed, then expand. Research carefully. Right plant, right place. So if it needs a lot of moisture, put them in a moist area. If it needs a little drier, put it in a drier area. Know those things about your plant. You do not have a snail or slug problem, you have a duck deficiency. These guys had ducks. So that's another way of thinking of it. You know, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Do you already know these things? You know, if you go out in your yard and you have a bunch of snails and slugs, what do you do about it? For many years, I was picking snails and slugs. I would fill up, you know, those yogurt containers that are like this big. They're 4 cups. I know that now. And I would fill up one of those every night, sometimes more, just by picking snails and slugs. And when I put in wood chips, that's when the problem, that's when the issue lessened. And so that has been much better now. And so that's one thing. Ducks are also very good at watering these things, if you can have ducks in your area. No pesticides. Again, this is a very, this community here is very focused on heirloom and natural growing and all of that. And if you do use pesticides, that really should be a last resort. And it really, I mean, if you can use something like neem oil or something like that as a pesticide instead of the chemical types, then that would be better. Honestly, most things you can squish with your hands. If it's bad enough, if there's enough aphids on it and I don't see the ladybugs in my yard, which there's always ladybugs in my yard, if it's bad enough for long enough, I'll cut off that thing and give it to my quail. And the chickens will do this too. I find the quail are better at getting the little bugs. And they will literally eat all the little aphids first and then eat the green thing. Now, don't give them Nightshade family greens, but they can have the aphids. Have fun trying and try some more. Have fun trying and try some more. So, have fun with it. It's not a serious endeavor. Hopefully you're not in a situation where it needs to be in a serious endeavor, and have fun with it. Keep going. Try another spot. This is so good. So try another spot. If something doesn't work in one location, it might just need to move 5 feet over. It might need more shade. It might need less shade. Your backyard, your property is going to have different microclimates, and it's going to be a little bit different here than it is over here. It's a little shady, a little sunny, a little more moist, a little hotter, all of that. And once you know that, you can move it to a different place and it will do just fine. Follow the science, ignore the woo. Okay, there are a lot of people who have theories that are not supported by actual actions. And so if you are following someone, especially on social media, anything I say, definitely double check with other people. Anything other people say, double check with somebody else, you know. I always like to have 3 sources that are reliable, be that a book or a person that I know are reliable. And so there's a lot of, oh, this is good for that, this is good for that. But look it up. Grow the soil. That's very important. Through my experience, the soil in the garden beds, it takes about 3 years. Between 3 and 5 years is when that soil really is full of life and really has that connection with the plants. And it takes a while because you have to get that microbiome, I guess is what you would call it. You want to get those microbes, you want to get those bacterias, you want to get those, you know, little bugs in there, the fungus, mycorrhizae, all of that. It should all be happening in that bed, and it takes a while to make that community. And it is a community, it's in the soil. I'm going to put a link up here for my soil conversation about soil and video, and so hopefully they'll check that out. And that's really important. You know, you want to feed the soil. You want to say, okay, let's put the leaves here this year instead of putting them in the yard waste can. You know, make sure it's covered. Make sure that you're planting things. As they say, Mother Nature does not like to be naked. She will cover herself. So if you don't plant something, there's going to be weeds. Always include some, and you know what that word is, but I'm going to say medicinal plants. Yeah, there we go. I don't have this particular plant. Some people do. Let favas and arugula grow wild. This is really, I think, a really good important thing. I love volunteer plant. Look at the link that we did earlier in the video for the volunteer plant overview like this, and then I will put another video that's a little older right here about volunteers in the garden. And when you let things self-sow, sometimes you won't get anything. Sometimes you will. There are varieties that self-sow easier than others, and it depends on your climate. So these are things that come up well for this person. Arugula is known for this. Lettuce also pops up everywhere, it seems. And there's certain species that do, or varieties that do, tend to self-sow, which is pretty cool. Automatic drip system. Yes! Yes, my favorite. Automatic water is the secret to your success. I believe this. I believe this with your animals. I believe this with your plants. If you don't have to water, then they are more likely to survive. That's my experience. I also work full-time and have a lot of things to do. If you have time to spend time in your garden and water everything by hand, that is perfectly good. Perfectly good. However, you go away for the day, you go away on vacation for a week, something comes up and nobody's there to water your garden, you might lose your plants. So automatic water is the best. Talk to your plants. So this is something I actually do. I sing a lot in my garden, and I sing, so that's part of me, but I do sing a lot in the garden, and there's a lot of studies about music in agriculture, about the effects of sound and all of that. And I'm going to leave that up to you guys to do, the Google Scholar research. However, having eyes on your plants is always good. And if you're singing to your plants, you're watching your plants, you are caring for them more often. And that is part of what is helpful to that. Now, I mean, hey, there could be another thing. When you breathe out, you have carbon dioxide going out. That is what the plants breathe in. The plants breathe out oxygen. We breathe in oxygen. So could be something to it. Don't be afraid. Just do it. Exactly. If you are afraid to plant a seed, the worst that will happen is that it won't grow. The worst that will happen is the plant will die. So if you go in with an open mind and you say, I am learning this year. I'm a first-time gardener. I'm going to plant my first seeds. I'm going to get my first plant starts from the nursery. I am going to be learning this year. And you can treat that as a learning year. I think that's good. Okay, I'm realizing I'm doing this as the sun is going down, so I just turned on the light. Use eco-friendly pest and predator control. This goes back to not harming your soil, not harming your plants with things like herbicide and pesticide, and then it makes for a better ecosystem. Just plant. Just do it. Same thing this person said. Do it. And you'll be planted and it's good. You're good to go. Connect with other local growers for very helpful info. This goes along with growing something that your neighbor grows, right? So other people that are gardening in your climate, in your area, in your state, in your zone, they will actually, most gardeners will love talking about gardening. Most gardeners will say, oh my gosh, I'm going to tell you exactly how this works for me. And that's really, really, really important, because as a first-time gardener, you want to know what works in your area. Now, that being said, what works for your neighbor may or may not work for you, and what works for you may or may not work for your neighbor, because there's microclimates, there's ways of doing things that are different, and so that's something to keep in mind. However, it's a good place to start. Work with Darwin, not against him. Basically, read the back of the seed packet, say, where do I need to plant this? Oh, you need lots of sun? Okay. Or, oh, you need to be in a moist situation? Okay. Do the best you can for your plants. And again, the worst thing that'll happen is they won't live. Don't struggle, just try stuff. So again, that goes back to the first year of gardening. Think of it as a test. I'm going to plant these things and it's just going to be planted, and whatever happens, happens. You find out what you need to do. Maybe you find out what you're not doing or what you need improving on. And if you try it, it works, then that's good. If you try it and it doesn't work, then you can assess further to know, one, do I really want to grow this? And two, if you do really want to grow this, how can I get there? Don't walk past a weed, pull it. I wish I paid attention to this. I most recently have grass growing all over because I did not pull some last year. So for sure, if you have cleaned up your area, wood chips did wonderful for me for this. I put on a bunch of wood chips. I mean, I can talk about wood chips all day. Yeah, I'll put a video here about wood chips and wood chip composting stuff. And that for me was good baseline start to say, okay, no more weeds. And then of course weeds start to creep in, and it really helps if you get it when you see it. Because when you get it when you see it, the roots are okay. They're okay to pull out. When you don't get it until like, oh yeah, that was that thing a month ago. It's like, okay, well I gotta yank this out now. Yeah. Native plants are good. Even if you're vegetable gardening or fruit tree gardening, native plants are good. Native plants will bring in native pollinators, and that is always a good thing. Patience, research, and good seeds. Yeah, all of those things. Patience is one thing you absolutely need. Keep trying. Do it a bit at a time. So that's good advice. Maybe you look at what your timing is and you say, okay, I want these things to be happening. How do I make them all happen? Okay, well today I'm going to plant these things, and next weekend I'm going to plant those things. And you can either say, I'm only going to grow one thing this season, which is not my advice. Some people would advise you of that. It's not my advice. Or you can say, I'm going to do these in sections and take it bit by bit. Start small. This is saying the same thing basically. And actually I don't necessarily agree with that one. Start small. I think if you have no knowledge of gardening, maybe that's the right approach. However, if you kind of have been watching videos about this, reading about it, you kind of think you know what's going on, I say really sit down and think about what you are able to use, and if you are able to preserve things, if you've had some practice canning, if you've had some practice, with these different preservation types, whether you plan to preserve or not, because that's an option. You don't have to, and decide how much you want to plant. Do you want to start small, or do you want to jump in? And that's going to be based on your needs and your personality type. Life lives. Things will grow, I think is what they're saying. Experiment wildly and freely. Again, the worst will happen is the plant will die. So experiment in places, experiment putting different plants together, experiment growing things where maybe they're not supposed to grow. Maybe you'll find out it really grows well there. But understand when you do this, it might not make it, and be okay with that before you start this endeavor. If you're going to experiment wildly and freely. Be patient. It's not that serious. Again, have fun with it, right? Do your research as to climate. So that again goes with the zones that we'll talk about at the end, and know what is supposed to grow in an area and what maybe isn't supposed to. Jump in. Again, just do it, right? Join a community garden and just keep planting. So again, if you plant just once, that's fine. If you want to plant in like successional planting, so if you want beans all summer, you can plant some now and some later and some, and then you will get that successional fruit as well. If you join a community garden, there are going to be other gardeners there, and if you're a first-time gardener, and some of them might be as well, and a lot of them will be very knowledgeable. So that's great advice. Try a different plant. So if something doesn't work for you, try something different. So that's, if you fail at something, try something different, whether that's a method or a variety or a totally different plant. You're fine. This year is not last year. That's so important. So I, for many years, grew tomatoes abundantly. I had so many tomatoes. I canned tomatoes, I made spaghetti sauce and salsa and all sorts of stuff. And I mean, it was really, really awesome. And then I think it was 2021. Yeah, I think it was 2021. We had a really, really, really hot summer. And with tomatoes, when it gets over a certain temperature, it's different for each variety, but 95, 100, whatever, we got up to 115. The flower blossoms actually become infertile. So sometimes they'll drop off, sometimes they'll just become infertile. So we were getting a pattern of spikes very regularly of really, really super high temperatures, and I did not get any tomatoes. I dedicated so much space in my garden to tomatoes that I did not get any tomatoes. Same thing happened the next year. This last year, I was able to grow tomatoes. I tried out some heat-tolerant varieties, which were not heirloom, because the ones that are heat-tolerant to that extent are not heirloom, as far as I could find. I talked to all the seed companies I could find, and I got tomatoes. So this year is not last year. You're going to have different humidity. You're going to have different fog. You're going to have different heat, different rain, all of this. I had one year that I was so excited. I planted so many peas, and then all of them rotted in the ground because we got so much rain. So every year is different. Really important. If you want a green thumb, it will be. Keep on studying, keep on practicing, and you'll get there. Learn how to protect your plants from animals. Again, this goes back to the caging. If you need different ideas. If you have a cat in your area, that most likely isn't your cat. Plastic forks or biodegradable forks are your answer. It sounds ridiculous. I had this issue with a neighbor's cat. Still not sure why cats and dogs have different rules in neighborhoods. But it would come, and it, as I call it, the great massacre of seedlings, did the whole poop thing and decided to cover everything up. I was mad. So I researched, and I'm like, I tried cat scram. That does not work, at least not here. I tried all sorts of things. I tried cayenne, sprinkling cayenne around. That didn't work. And then I came upon this thing. I don't even know where I found it. It was basically a fortress of forks. So you take a fork like this and you stick it in the soil on the edge of your bed, facing like this, and you do 2 or 3 rows of that, this far apart, and it makes a little like castle rook. And it works. It's ridiculous looking, and I use pinwheels for the birds. That works. Yeah, my yard looked very interesting that couple years. He no longer comes over though. No more excuses, just do it, right? Consider whether keeping true to type makes sense for you. So there's all this information, all of these things about heirlooms, all these things about, oh, this needs to be this, it's open pollinated, it's not open pollinated, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter to you. If you're saving your seeds, doesn't matter. If it doesn't matter to you, save your seeds however you want, and you can plant those next year. If it does matter to you, make sure you look up how to save those seeds. There's some really good resources out there, and depending on the variety of vegetable or grain or whatever, and then that will be your thing. So just make that decision. Mulch is your best friend. I already sang the praises of wood chips, so that's what I'm talking about, is mulch. Wood chips, you can use hay, you can use leaves, you can use a lot of different things for a lot of different scenarios. So there you go. It's awesome. It retains moisture. It prevents a lot of things from happening. It's good. Test your soil. So this is mostly important if you're having issues with something. You could do it at the beginning, and if you don't know what your soil is, do a soil test. It also is important for old farmland, because old farmland had a lot of dumped stuff on it. So the orchards in the valley out here, the San Joaquin Valley, they used to take old used motor oil and put that on the roads that go around the orchards to keep the dust down. That's no longer the practice, I hope. All right, it's getting dark, guys. I didn't think it was gonna get dark this fast. Try to propagate. Absolutely. You can do, especially things like tomatoes, every hair on those stems you can propagate. There's so many things you can do. You can cut, so propagate, basically cutting off a plant material and putting it in soil or in water, with or without the use of a rooting hormone, which could be a store-bought one or one made with willow. So there's a lot of different things you can do. Patience, eyes on it every day. So again, knowing what your plants are doing, knowing if there's an infestation, knowing if they need water, all of that. Use sea and rock nutrients. So I do use azomite in my soil preparation. I use azomite. It is a rock dust that adds, so both of those add the micronutrients into the soil, and it fairly quickly gets taken up by the plants. It used to be thought that it took quite a while to get into the plants, and new research has actually shown it doesn't take that long. Be willing to make mistakes. Again, the worst that'll happen is the plant will die. Don't forget to add nitrogen, not just compost. This is going to be garden specific, so depending on what your soil is looking like, depending on what you've planted, you know, if something was growing there before you got there, all of that stuff. But that is something to think about, is what might you need to add. There are no failures, only learning experiences. We had that up on top here. We had some repeats here. Be a feel-based forager. So I tried to look this up, and I believe what they're saying is foraging, and either instead of gardening or with gardening, and when you're foraging, that you are connecting with the earth in that way. That is what I understood when I looked up that term. Experiment. Don't be scared. Got a couple experimentations up there. That is the advice from the National Heirloom Expo. There's thousands of people that came. This is how many decided to ride on the board that day, and it was a blast there. So if you contributed to this, thank you, and maybe put a note down below and maybe expand on what your advice is. If you are currently a gardener, go ahead and put down in the comments what your best advice is for first-time gardeners. We'd love to hear it. I told you guys I would talk about the USDA planting zones and chill hours. It is basically dark, so I'm gonna move the camera a little bit and see if we can get this. Okay, I brought you guys a little closer so you can actually see. This USDA planting zones actually just changed, and I'll put a link up here. It was just a brief video I did about that. And the USDA planting zones are good if you're in the United States. If you're not in the United States, other countries have a similar system. Not every country has it. I think somewhere in Europe there's some other thing, I'm not sure what it's called. Anyway, so what this is it's a hardiness zone. So it doesn't say anything about how much water you're getting, doesn't say anything about how hot it's getting, it doesn't say anything about how long your growing season is. The only thing it says is, can I plant this and will it die if it gets to the coldest average? So your coldest average temperature, so basically what's expected, what's the coldest temperature expected for your area? That's what the map is based on. And so here in Gilroy, California, I am in zone 9B, and that means I can grow a whole lot of things. If you're, up in Oregon and you're in the high desert and your zone is, maybe 6 or 5, you're not going to be able to get away with growing citrus unless you grow them in a heated greenhouse. And these things mainly, they do apply to vegetables and stuff, but mainly to permanent plants. So trees and shrubs and permanent plants. My little boys are going crazy. And then the same goes for chill hours. So with chill hours, if you're in a cold environment, you don't really have to pay much attention to this because you're going to get enough chill hours. If you're in an environment like mine, then you may have to pay more attention. So an example of this is, I believe it's 40 degrees, and somebody can correct me on that. It's either 40 or 45 degrees and lower to be a chill hour, and certain plants need a certain number of hours below that temperature in a given year to actually produce fruit. So they may not flower, or they may flower. And even if they flower, if they don't get the chill hours they need, they won't get the fruit. So that's been happening specifically with cherries. Here, there's a lot of local cherry orchards that went out of business. They cut down their trees. You know, it's not profitable to pick the tiny amount of fruit their trees produce, and that's because the chill hours are changing. So we are starting to get warmer, and that's, you know, all a part of, you know, the climate is changing, and we see that with the varieties that people can grow, the types of plants people can grow. And the USDA actually just updated the planting zones, the hardiness zones, and that was that link that I put up there. The USDA tracks these things and comes up with these maps so that you can be more informed about where you are limited or may be limited to grow things. Now, there are some things that people say, oh, this is a zone, blah, blah, blah. Well, things like macadamia nuts, they're tropical. They grow in the Bay Area, California. You can grow macadamia nuts here. Does it say that anywhere on the internet when you look up, hey, what zone do these grow in? It's going to tell you warmer in most cases. And so if you're on the edge of a zone, or you're like, you know, I really do have like that warm corner against the house that really doesn't get much wind and it never freezes there. You know, I never get ice. You know, when it frosts, I never see frost there. You might be able to push the limits and plant some things that are on those edges. So that's another thing to think about. My other advice for first-time gardeners is to do it. Do your research, see what zones you're in, get your first and last frost date. I should have put that up there. I needed to. Your first and last frost date will be extremely helpful to you. And when you look on the back of a seed packet, it likely is going to say, you know, plant indoors 4 weeks before your last frost date, or plant after your first frost. You know, like there's things that are frost tender, there's things that are not frost tender. It matters for some, it doesn't matter for others. And if you know that, you can literally look it up on the internet and say, put in your zip code and say, first frost, last frost. First frost. You can look in the internet and type in your zip code and then first frost and last frost, and that will give you basically your start of the season, which is the last frost date, and your end of season, which is your first frost date. So that whole, you know, spring, summer, fall, that will be, you know, depending on where you are. If you're in northern latitudes, it might look like this, right? If this is your calendar and here's spring and summer and fall and winter, you know, you may be more like this. You may have more winter. You probably already know that. If you're in Louisiana, it's probably going to look like this. Your winter is very, very short, and then the rest of this time is your growing season. So your winter is very, very short, and the rest of this time is the growing season. So that will identify your growing season. Then you'll be able to figure out how many days you have. So a lot of your seed packets will say it's so many days to maturity. So it's 90 days to maturity. That means when you plant that seed in a normal year, it should produce fruit by 90 days. So you can look on your calendar and type that in and say, okay, here's where it is. And so you can look in your calendar and put that in the calendar and say, okay, well, when should I expect this to fruit? Well, if you're planting later and it's going to expect to be fruit after that last frost date, after that first frost date, it's likely not something you should plant. So that is my first advice, is to look at your frost, you know, first frost, last frost. And the rest of the advice, guys, it's on this chart. So there's a lot to go through. Keep going. Don't give up. Every Monday night, I have a live chat, 6 p.m. Pacific time. If you are looking for advice or, you know, help or want to vent about, hey, this thing's not working. I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. What should I try next? And you can get, my advice, and you can get the advice of our community. So I highly suggest you attend those and, let us know what you need as a first-time gardener, and we'll get you started. So hopefully I'll see you on the Monday nights lives. This Monday, which is going to be tomorrow, this is our topic of discussion. So I always have a topic of discussion somewhere in the middle. This is going to be our topic of discussion, is advice to first-time gardeners, and we can have a full discussion on this. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little long, but people tend to like all of this content relating to growing things. So I hope you find this helpful, useful, entertaining, and that you are enthused to grow your own garden now. So thank you for watching. Give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Join us on our Monday night live, 6 p.m. Pacific time, and we'll see you there. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.